speaker, Mr. Robert Bailey, is from the Regional Outreach, well, he is the Regional Outreach Officer for the Department of Immigration and Citizenship. He's going to be talking about some opportunities in skill.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank the Department of Commerce for the opportunity to come and speak to you this morning. And hopefully, for those that are interested in sponsoring people out under the skilled migration program, I may be able to answer some questions for you. The thumb drive has this complete presentation in it. I'm going to try to do skilled migration in a nutshell. It's quite complex, and I'll be skipping through a lot of stuff. So just to put it into context, the skilled migration program this year represents close to 70% of the total migration program in Australia. And you can see, looking back at 1984, it was a very small segment of the total program, which was pretty much based around family migration. From an employer's perspective, you're able to employ not only citizens, you can employ people who are holders of permanent residence visas. These people can live, work, study in Australia, and you're able to employ them. It starts getting a little more complex when you're looking at holders of temporary resident visas. Yes. So you can sponsor people in under a 457 visa, which is a temporary visa, runs from 1 day to 4 years. You can also employ the family members, dependents of the 457 visa holders. And you might also find that students are able to work for 20 hours a week during semesters, and they can knock themselves out and work as much as they like when they're on semester breaks. Their partners are also limited to the number of hours that they can work during a week. You also may come across graduates, people who've completed their graduate studies in Australia, have an opportunity to remain in Australia for 18 months and can work full-time to gain experience in the field that they've actually chosen to do their studies in. Working Holidaymaker visas, you probably may be familiar with them. There are certainly a lot of Irish people in Australia at the moment, and certainly looking for ways to stay permanently. But under this program, as an employer, you can employ somebody for up to 6 months, then they've got to go. If a person holds a 417 Working Holidaymaker visa, if they work in a regional part of Australia, in either construction, mining or agriculture, for 3 months, they can make themselves eligible for a second 12-month Working Holidaymaker visa and come back and work for you for 6 months in that second year, if you so choose. The important thing at the moment, and this is a bit of black hat stuff, is it's incumbent upon an employer to check the work rights of a visa holder. And right now there are certainly sanctions and fines for employers that are caught employing somebody who is not lawfully able to work. In February's parliamentary sitting, where they're looking at the employer sanctions legislation and increasing the fines that relate to this. At the moment, they're about $13,200 per worker and up to 2 years imprisonment, and for a company it's $66,000 per worker. They're looking at significantly increasing those fines. Whether this gets passed is for history to determine. So looking at the actual program itself, there's a menu of visas that you're able to sponsor people under. So the 457, it's usually in the news at least once a week. Very commonly used. There are thousands of people in Australia on this visa. It's not capped, i.e. that means any number of people, depending on what the labour market actually needs, can be brought into Australia. And it's for an employer to work out whether or not they're going to be able to sponsor somebody in, whether or not the actual job is able to be sponsored. Beneath that you'll see labour agreements. That's a more flexible area. It can be in both the temporary and permanent visa areas, but it's where if the occupation that the employer is seeking to fill is not on one of our lists or doesn't qualify, and if some of you, I hope, would be familiar with the ANSCO, the Australian New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations, which becomes our Bible to determine whether or not we'll let people come into Australia under a skilled program. There can be concessions granted, but it's a negotiation between an employer and the Department of Immigration to determine whether or not we will allow concessions in English and skill levels, i.e. the actual occupation that you're wishing to bring in, and the numbers of people that you wish to bring in under that program. Below that, the regional sponsored migration scheme. This is a permanent one. About 2010, it was legislated that all of WA became a region for this purpose. Up until then, only people outside the Perth metropolitan area could access the regional sponsored migration scheme. It once again has concessions relating to the breadth of occupations that can be sponsored in. The ANSCO, Australian New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations, down to level 3 is all fair game for an employer to sponsor. The employer nomination scheme is very, very similar to the RSMS program, except it's a prescribed list of occupations. If the occupation isn't on the list, you can't bring that person in. And the skilled independent down the bottom there is for people who are sponsoring themselves. So it's a points-based test. So just quickly through these, because I'm running out of time and there's so much information. So I would hope that you'll take away that USB and have a good look at it. It'll fill in a lot of the gaps that I'm passing over. So I pretty much covered the 457 in my earlier discussion of it. We had some reforms introduced last year in the permanent programs that actually collapsed the streams. So instead of 6 visas in these things that defined onshore and offshore applications, it's all been collapsed down to 2 visas, one for RSMS and one for ENS. We've streamlined the path for workers who are already employed by an employer from the 457 stream into permanent residence, made it a lot easier. We've raised the eligible age from 45 to 50. And we've also made some changes to the English skill levels for permanent residents and taken that up somewhat. This is under the IELTS program, International English Language Testing System. We've also facilitated some of the transition from the use of the regional certifying network, which was responsible for the RSMS program. In some instances has now been taken away. And we've introduced one consolidated list. Previously we had about 4 or 5 different lists for different purposes. Now we've got the one. Where are we? Oops, yes, temporary residence. I think I can pass on some of this. It basically goes, the presentation itself goes into further detail about the streams that we're using to facilitate movement from 457 to permanent entry through both the ENS and the RSMS schemes. There are some exemptions that apply. Passport holders from the UK, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand or US don't have to sit English tests, everybody else does. There are age restrictions that can be looked at, and concessions. They generally relate to salary levels. So anybody over the age of 50 who is being paid for the previous 4 years under the 457 program in excess of the Fair Work Australia high income threshold, which at this point is $118,000. It's okay to bring them in if they're over 50. There's also an English exemption for people paid more than $180,000 per annum, so they don't have to sit the English tests. So I've just pretty much covered there. Labour agreements, touched on that. If you wish to sponsor somebody in and you're having difficulties, best thing to do is talk to one of our outreach officers. I'm based at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry WA. We have another outreach officer based at the Chamber of Minerals and Energy. But talk to us and we may be able to steer you towards a labour agreements. But, and I've certainly mentioned the criteria for that. Under the general skill migration program, where people are able to try and sponsor themselves in, there's a facility called Skill Select. These people can actually put their data, their CV and their contact details, if they wish, onto this database. You as an employer can access that database by going through a very simple process. If you're searching for somebody with a specific skills set, and you can make direct contact with them and determine whether or not they might be somebody that you wish to sponsor into Australia. And I'll just hark back once again to the employer sanctions issue and the role that an employer must play in terms of determining whether or not somebody is able to be employed. Go onto our website, www.imi.gov.au. You don't have to write it down because it'll all be on the presentation. And there's a section called VIVO. It's Visa Entitlement Verification Online. You register with that, and you can, by talking to the person who's wishing to be employed, get their passport details. You punch that in, and we will send you an automated response that determines whether or not you're able to employ that person, or whether there is some kind of encumbrance on their ability to work. So, for more information, bits and pieces there, and down the bottom there should be my mobile number. So please use that as a reference, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.